There is a silent key that few can see, because it makes no noise, it requires no effort, and precisely for that reason, it seems irrelevant. But it is this key that completely transforms what you call reality. The greatest illusion that still imprisons human consciousness is the belief that it is necessary to struggle, act, or make an effort to change what is around you. Most people live trying to fix the world outside, when everything that needs to be released is inside. True transformation doesn't happen when you do more, but when you learn to observe from a different place. And that change of observer requires no strength. It requires presence. As long as you insist on controlling, judging, or correcting what surrounds you, you keep feeding exactly the patterns you want to break. And that is why life seems to go in circles. That is why the answers don't come. That is why you feel like the universe is silent. But what if that silence is the answer? What if everything that seems still is only waiting for you to change your vibration to collapse a new reality? Today, we are going to go through a deeper layer of consciousness. We are going to expose why the external reality is just a reflection of your internal field, and how you can rewrite it without moving a muscle. The secret is not in the effort, it's in the frequency, and you already carry it. What's missing is to stop resisting. If you feel stuck, maybe it's not because something outside is blocking you, but because your way of seeing is still stuck in what should have already been left behind. This video is not content, it's a mirror, and it can change everything if you allow yourself to be seen by it. For most of our lives, we were taught that everything we want to achieve depends on effort, that we need to fight, insist, resist. This belief is rooted in almost every structure of society. Since childhood, we've learned that reward comes to those who work the hardest, those who chase after it, those who never stop. But few ask, why, even with so much effort, do I still feel stuck? Why, even though I'm doing everything right, does it seem like something invisible is still holding me back? The truth is that physical, mental, or emotional effort does not have the power to alter the quantum field at its core. The field responds to something much more subtle, your vibration. And vibration is not born from action. It is born from your consciousness. It's the state of presence, not movement, that collapses new possibilities. But that contradicts everything the mind has learned. The mind wants control. It wants logic. It wants proof. But the quantum field doesn't respond to logic. It responds to your most intimate frequency, the one that vibrates even when you're silent. This is the secret that few access. The reality around you is not waiting for you to do something. It's waiting for you to feel differently, to observe differently, to be different inside. Because it's the way you look that transforms what you see. The external world is just a mirror, a living repetition of your internal field. And while your vibration remains stuck in the same fears, the same pains, the same reactions, the world will continue to reflect the same scenario, with new forms, new characters, but the same essence. That's where the invisible prison of resistance comes in. When you fight against what is, when you try to force a change without first changing the observer, you create even more friction in the field. The flow closes. The answers move away. Reality enters repeat mode. And you find yourself stuck between exhaustion and guilt, not understanding why life won't move forward. But the truth is, effort is not missing. Presence is. Letting go is. Because when you let go, the frequency rises. And when the frequency rises, the field responds. This is the paradox. The more you try to control, the further you get from true control. True control doesn't come from doing. It comes from being. And being requires no effort. It requires consciousness. What's collapsing your reality now is not the amount of effort you're making, but the quality of your internal state. Is it collapsing fear or trust? Scarcity or surrender? Resistance or flow? Imagine you are in front of a calm lake. If you throw a stone, the water stirs. The image distorts. But if you simply observe, in silence, the surface begins to reflect perfectly. Reality is that lake. When you enter presence, without resistance, the image it shows you starts to transform. Not because you stirred the water, but because you stopped causing distortion. And here lies one of the most ignored keys. Effort is born from the idea that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. But observation is born from the awareness that everything is revealing itself according to the internal state I'm vibrating right now. You don't need to fix reality. You need to release the frequency that is creating it. And this isn't done with force. It's done with truth, with silence, with surrender. How many times have you tried to change someone, change a situation, change a scenario, and all you got back was more resistance? That's not bad luck. It's a mirror. It's the field saying, as long as you try to force, what exists will fight to remain. But if you stop, breathe, return inward, what's outside starts to lose strength, because you stepped out of the repetition game and entered the field of conscious creation. Maybe this is the greatest challenge of our time, unlearning effort, because the ego wants to prove it deserves. It wants to show it won. But the soul isn't interested in victory. It's interested in alignment, and alignment is not achieved. It's allowed. While the mind still tries to solve life like a logical equation, there is a deeper layer of existence that operates in another language. It's not the language of speech, nor of visible action, but of silent vibration. The universe, the quantum field, God, however you want to call it, is not listening to what you say. It's feeling who you are. And this who you are is not defined by your conscious intentions, but by the real frequency you are emanating now, with or without words. That's why so many positive affirmations don't work. That's why so many requests seem ignored. You can say, I trust, but if your body vibrates fear, the field responds to fear. You can repeat, I am at peace, but if your nervous system is on alert, the field picks up the internal war. This is not punishment, it's precision. The universe does not respond to what you want. It mirrors what you are, at the most subtle level of being. And it is exactly there that the spiritual logic behind non-action resides. In quantum physics, there is a principle that breaks the traditional view of reality. The observer interferes with the observed. This means that the way you look changes what is being looked at, but this looking is not just the physical sense of vision. It's a vibrational gaze. It's your energetic presence before the experience. When you approach a situation with judgment, fear, urgency, or anxiety, that energy shapes the behavior of the reality around you. But when you enter a state of neutral presence, something changes. The field opens. Matter responds. What once seemed solid dissolves. And life, which once resisted, begins to flow. This is the real alchemy, changing without forcing, transforming without touching. Because everything in the universe is vibration. Thoughts are vibration. Emotions are vibration. Intentions too. But the field is not naive. It is not fooled by pretty words or rushed visualizations. It resonates with the background vibration, the one that continues even when you're not trying. That's why many transformations only happen when you let go. When you get tired of trying, surrender, and simply allow yourself to feel what's there. It is at this point that energy reorganizes, because constant struggle activates what neuroscience calls survival mode, a mental state in which the brain repeats old patterns as a form of protection. In this state, the nervous system becomes tense, attention narrows, and all you perceive are threats, obstacles, the same old problems. But when you deactivate this internal war, something magical begins to happen. The brain shifts frequency, synapses start to reorganize, and what was once automatic dissolves. This is spiritual neuroplasticity, not as a technical concept, but as a living experience of rewriting one's own perception. In the spiritual field, this process is known as conscious surrender. It is when you decide to stop resisting, not because you gave up, but because you understood that fighting reality is like trying to hold water in your hands. Control is an illusion, and the more you try to hold on, the more it slips away. But if you open your hands, the water settles, the flow returns. You may think, but if I don't do anything, life will stay the same. That is the voice of conditioning. The fear of stagnation makes you keep struggling, even when you're already exhausted. But the truth is that at the quantum level, the most powerful movement is internal. The external reality is just the projection of this invisible field, and if the field changes, the projection changes. It's not about being passive, but being precise. There are moments when action is indeed necessary, but it only has power when it comes from a state of alignment. Otherwise, it turns into agitation. It wastes energy and transforms nothing. You run, you try, you push, and in the end, you're back in the same place. Because the point of origin didn't change, the observer is still the same. And here comes one of the subtlest truths. The reality you experience is shaped not by the facts, but by the state in which you observe them. The same event can be a trauma or an awakening, depending on the vibration with which it is welcomed. The same silence can be abandonment or a portal, depending on the consciousness that passes through it. The universe is neutral. It is your vibration that gives meaning to everything. It's easy to blame life, the past, or others. To say that things don't change because of circumstances, old wounds, or wrong choices. But at some quieter, truer point, you've already felt that there's something more subtle. Something that seems to repeat the same energy, even when everything around you changes, as if reality had an echo, and that echo is yourself. Most people believe they are living something new, when in fact they are only witnessing variations of the same vibrational pattern. The situation changes, the setting changes, the faces change, but the internal feeling is the same. That feeling of always chasing, always trying, always hoping that something will finally work. And when it doesn't, the emptiness returns. The doubt returns. The feeling of inadequacy returns, as if you still owed something to life. What you may not have realized is that your reality is not being created by your conscious desires, but by the unconscious programs your vibration sustains. And these programs are not just mental beliefs. They are energetic fields born from unresolved experiences, from unprocessed pain, from old versions of yourself that are still waiting to be released. It's as if there are still echoes inside you. The child who wasn't welcomed, the teenager who had to remain silent, the adult who learned to resist in order to survive. These versions keep emitting a vibration, and that is what the field is listening to. This is where the invisible repetition comes in. You're not consciously choosing to live the same, but you are vibrating the same. And the field, being extremely coherent, keeps showing you exactly what you haven't released yet. This is not punishment. It's a mirror. Reality is not trying to hurt you. It's trying to show you where you're still stuck. And often, what we call a problem is just a reflection of our own internal state asking to be released. You feel like you're always on the verge of something, but never cross it. Always in search of peace, but never at rest. Always trying to be someone better, but still carrying the feeling of not being enough. And the more you search for the answer outside, the farther away it seems to be, because what needs to be seen is not in the future, it's vibrating now, and what is not released here will repeat there. In other words, life doesn't change because you change the setting. It changes when you change your frequency. Maybe you're waiting for a big breakthrough, a clear sign, a divine certainty. But the field does not respond to waiting. It responds to states. And as long as you keep seeking something to fill what you feel, you will keep creating realities that reinforce the absence. Because what is missing is not something. It's the welcoming of what you still haven't wanted to feel. Transformation doesn't begin with a decision, but with a loving confrontation. I am ready to look at what is still vibrating here. You don't need to discover all the causes. You don't need to understand every trauma. You just need to stop running. Sit with yourself, breathe, and observe with honesty where inside you still lives the same fear, the same expectation, the same attempt at control. That is where the program is. That is where the repetition is. And it's exactly there that you can let go. And when you let go, the field changes. Because what was sustaining the repetition wasn't the situation. It was your vibration toward it. The collapse of the old reality doesn't happen through force. It happens through permission. When you stop reacting, the energy reorganizes, and what seemed impossible begins to dissolve effortlessly. Now, If this touched something in you, if at some point in this message you felt, yes, I am vibrating the same cycle and I don't want to repeat it anymore, then stop for a second, breathe with presence, and write in the comments, today I let go of the pattern. I'm ready to vibrate the new. Saying this is not just a gesture, it is a vibrational choice. And when you declare it with presence, the field hears it. If this made sense to you, like this video. That helps the content reach more people who, like you, are ready to leave repetition behind and start creating from a new state. Most people don't realize that reality is not a fact, but an interpretation. And more than that, it's a projection of the observer. What you live, feel, and see as real is being shaped at every moment by the internal lens through which you observe the world. And that lens is not neutral. It is made of memories, vibrational patterns, conditionings, and emotional protection layers accumulated over life. Reality is not telling you what is true. It's only reflecting what you're ready to see. That's why the same situation can be lived in completely different ways by two people. What represents a limit for one is an opportunity for another. What causes pain for one reveals healing for another. The difference is not in the facts, but in the internal state of the observer. Life is a quantum mirror. It does not show you what you want, nor what you deserve. It shows you what you are vibrating right now, even if that vibration is not conscious. When you look at your life and feel stuck, blocked, or stagnant, the natural tendency is to try to fix it by changing the setting. Look for a new direction, a new practice, a new answer. But what if the problem is not in what you're living, but in the internal place from which you are seeing it? What if you are trying to escape something that doesn't need to be resolved, only observed from another frequency? Imagine a mirror. You approach it, angry with the reflected image. You yell, complain, try to push, change, erase the reflection, but it doesn't respond. The mirror doesn't react to your desire. It only reflects what's there. The only way to change what you see is to change yourself. Reality works exactly like that. The more you fight with the reflection, the more worn out you become. The more you try to force something to change out there, the more you distance yourself from the true origin of transformation, the observer. You are not trapped because the world out there imprisons you. You are trapped because you are still looking with the eyes of the past. You still see life from the version of yourself that learned to protect, to resist, to seek control. That version is not wrong. It was necessary. But now it is limiting you. Because what once saved you now holds you back. Many of the pains you live today are not born from your current reality, but from how your field interprets each situation through old records. It's as if, with each new experience, your system asks, does this look like what once hurt? And if it does, it activates the same defense pattern. You react before you realize. You shut down before you feel. You judge before you observe. And without noticing, you recreate exactly what you wanted to avoid. The path to release begins when you stop trying to fix the reflection and start observing yourself as the source. When you take responsibility and say, this reality is mirroring something that vibrates in me. I may not understand everything, but I can take responsibility for how I'm relating to this. That self-responsibility is not guilt, it's power. Because as long as you believe life is happening to you, you feel like a victim. But when you realize that life is responding to you, you begin to awaken. The densest point of repetition is when you start to believe that what you're living is permanent, that the pattern is you, that the reflection is the truth. But that is only the tired mind saying, there is no other way. The mind doesn't like the unknown. It prefers familiar pain over the emptiness of the new. But the soul wants silence. It wants the space between thoughts. It wants the field where everything can be resignified. And that space only opens when you let go of the role of trying to beat the mirror and begin to see yourself with presence. To see with presence is to look at life without the rush to fix. It is to recognize that, even in chaos, there is an invitation. Even in stagnation, there is a necessary pause. Even in pain, there is access to a part of you still asking to be released. And when you change the internal place from which you observe, the reflection starts to shift. Slowly, silently, almost imperceptibly, but in a real way. Transformation begins when you understand that what holds you back is not life. It's the way you interpret it, and that interpretation is not fixed. It can be rewritten, not with effort, but with awareness. Not with struggle, but with presence. Not with haste, but with surrender. Reality is not your prison, it is your mirror. And it is waiting for the moment when you stop shouting at the reflection and start smiling at the one behind the glass. The human mind has been conditioned to believe that transformation requires rupture, effort, or some external event to justify it. As if a collapse, a crisis, a very intense pain were necessary for something new to finally be born. And because of that, many keep postponing true change, waiting for life to force a turning point. But there is another path, a path almost invisible to eyes trained by haste, the path of conscious choice. Not a mental, rational, or forced choice, but a vibrational choice. A silent decision to no longer sustain the old field. You don't need to be in extreme suffering to change, nor do you need to reach your limit to be free. The real turning point doesn't happen in chaos. It happens in the subtle instant when you pause, breathe, and say, I don't need to vibrate this anymore. And when that decision comes from the depth of being, it alters the field. Without noise, without announcement, without drama. Reality begins to respond because something inside you has changed frequency. And when the frequency changes, the reflection changes with it. Maybe what is missing isn't a new method, a new theory, or a miraculous practice. Maybe what's missing is simply the willingness to honestly observe what you are still choosing, even if unconsciously. Because every pattern only remains active when there is, at some level, a vibrational permission. Something inside you still sustaining that old version, whether out of fear, attachment, or familiarity. The ego prefers the known, even if painful, over the unknown that brings freedom. That's why change is frightening. Not because it's hard, but because it requires surrender. And here is the true key. You can choose to let go. You can choose to release control. You can choose not to repeat the usual reaction. At every moment, there is a fork in the road between repeating and rewriting. And that fork doesn't appear with spotlights. It manifests in small situations. A conversation, a thought, an emotion that arises. There, in the space between stimulus and response, lies the power of transformation. Not because you did something new, but because you chose to be someone new in front of the same old scenario. This is the point where the concept of quantum choice comes to life. In the quantum field, every possibility already exists. There is not a single destiny. There are infinite potentials waiting for a vibrational choice. Your current reality is just the probability line you keep reinforcing with your attention, your emotions, your thoughts, and your identity. But the instant you alter that identity, when you stop seeing yourself as the one who suffers, the one who needs to fight, the one who needs to prove, in that instant, another field opens. A new line begins to form, not on the outside, but in your inner field. And this is where many people get stuck, because they wait for the new to manifest first so they can then feel different. But reality doesn't work like that. The external field only changes when the internal vibration changes first. The reflection comes after the new presence. You can't wait for the mirror to smile before changing your expression. The image only responds after you change what's being reflected. Does that require faith? Yes. But not the blind faith of someone waiting for something external. The vibrational faith of someone who has already decided to be now what they want to live later. This process is not about pretending everything is okay when it's not. It's about truly feeling what exists, but no longer identifying with it. It's about saying, this still vibrates in me, but I choose not to feed it. And every time you do that, even if imperfectly, you are deprogramming a pattern. You are signaling to the field that you are ready for something different. and the field responds. Always. Sometimes with silence, sometimes with movement, sometimes with apparent chaos, but always with coherence. The rewriting begins like this, with a choice that seems too small to matter, but that carries a completely new vibration. You stop fighting, stop searching outside, stop repeating, and start sustaining within yourself a new frequency, one that doesn't need to be explained, only felt. This is the point where reality begins to bend, not because of an external force, but because your inner field has changed. And when the field changes, everything changes with it. There is a point where the search for answers becomes a bigger obstacle than the pain itself. A moment when trying to understand, control, or justify every feeling starts to weigh more than the suffering itself. And that's where many get lost. They confuse awareness with vigilance, presence with self-control, surrender with weakness. But there is a spiritual technology that cannot be learned, only lived, and it begins the moment you release the need to know and allow yourself to simply feel. Flow, that state of lightness and alignment that so many seek, is not something you build. It's not a place reached through effort or strategy. Flow is a natural state of consciousness when it stops resisting. It doesn't come from perfection, but from surrender. Not from absolute clarity, but from the willingness to walk even in the presence of doubt. Flow does not require control, it requires trust. And that, for many, is the most challenging part, because trusting, when everything around you seems stagnant, is an act of silent courage. It is deciding not to give in to the despair of the mind that wants an immediate solution. It is breathing even when there are no guarantees. It is moving forward even without signs. And this isn't something learned in books, nor taught in formulas. It's something you go through. You feel. You embody. True surrender is not a theatrical gesture. It is an internal act of disidentification. You let go of the role of the one who needs to fight, who needs to prove, who needs to fix, and simply become space, presence, observer. And in that space, the new enters. What many call a stuck life is, in truth, a vibrational reality being sustained by fear of letting go of control. And that fear is understandable. The ego learned it needs to command everything to survive. It believes that if it lets go, everything will fall apart. That if it's not in control, it will be swallowed by chaos. But the paradox is that the more the ego controls, the more it creates its own chaos. Because flow does not conform to control. It activates through permission. Neuroscience has a name for the state in which the brain accesses more creative, intuitive, and healing responses. The default mode network, or conscious daydreaming state. It's when the mind stops focusing on a single point, relaxes, and allows nonlinear connections to happen. Spiritually, this is the same space we call creative silence. The moment when the field begins to reorganize because you got out of the way. You stopped interfering, and so something new can emerge. Not because you thought harder, but because you allowed it. Maybe you are at a moment when everything feels stuck. Maybe you're tired of trying to feel positive, of repeating affirmations, of practicing techniques that no longer resonate. And maybe right now, this exhaustion is not a mistake. It is a portal, because only those who are tired of trying to control are ready to enter true flow. Flow is not superficial enthusiasm. It is deep surrender. It is not euphoria. It is peace. That peace that does not depend on circumstances because it is born from the absence of resistance. Allowing yourself to enter this space is often uncomfortable because it brings no promises. It doesn't deliver immediate answers, but it brings something that no effort does: lightness. And lightness is a sign that you've returned home, not to an idealized idea of who you should be, but to the silent space of who you really are, without the filters, the fears, the programs. The space where the soul breathes without fear of being. In this state, what needs to come, comes. What needs to leave, leaves. And you stop clinging to the idea that you need to move the world for something to change. You understand that moving the world begins with no longer resisting yourself. That the greatest possible movement is non-interference. That flow is not created. It is revealed when you release control and become receptive. It's as if the universe were saying all the time, "You don't need to lead me. You just need to trust the next step." And that step almost never comes with all the guarantees. It comes with presence. And when you take that step truthfully, even in silence, the field responds. Because the frequency of surrender is one of the highest that exists. It doesn't ask. It doesn't demand. It simply vibrates. I trust. And at that point, you are no longer seeking healing. You are being the healing. Because where there is flow, there is release. Where there is surrender, there is alignment. Where there is true surrender, there is nothing left to conquer, only to be lived. We've reached the end of our journey. And maybe you've already realized that nothing said here needs to be remembered. It needs to be felt. Because this is not about memorizing concepts or adopting one more spiritual idea. It's about returning to a place within yourself where things simply make sense, not because they were explained, but because they were recognized. That place is the true point of transformation. Life doesn't change when you learn something new. It changes when you stop sustaining the old. And that begins with a silent choice: to release effort, trust the flow, and allow the new reality to reveal itself from your new frequency. If this experience touched something in you, let me know in the comments by writing, "I trust the field. I'm ready to live in flow." That way I'll know you stayed until the end and walked with me to this point of presence. See you in the next video.